Hey guys, what's going on? Seth here from retipster.com, and in this video I'm going to cover a lot of the sort of fundamental principles of SEO. And when I say SEO, I'm talking about search engine optimization. So if you have no idea what search engine optimization is, essentially this is the process of trying to affect the visibility of a website in the natural, organic, unpaid search results on a website like Google. So this video is going to be kind of like SEO 101. I wouldn't say you're going to be an expert on how to get your website to rank #1 for everything all the time, but what you're going to walk away with is a pretty good basic understanding of how to actually start getting traction today, because this has actually changed a lot over the years as the internet has matured, as Google and other search engines have changed up how they process things and how their algorithms work. So what I want to tell you is really like the basics of what's working right now. So if you're not already familiar with me, I'm Seth Williams. I'm the founder of retipster.com. It's a real estate investing blog that's been going since 2012. We get a couple 100,000 visitors a month, and about 85% of that traffic is organic. People just find the website through various Google search terms. So I kind of know what I'm talking about here. I wouldn't say I'm like the foremost expert, but I've done arguably at least a few things right. I don't say any of this to like toot my own horn or brag or anything like that, but I just want to let you know that you can put at least some stock in what I'm saying here. I'm not just regurgitating old information or anything like that. So to start with, if we go here to Google, let's just type in something like, I don't know, sell my house fast or something to that effect. So you're probably familiar with how Google works, where there's a handful of ads up here at the top, and then you scroll down here and see the organic search results. And these are the websites that Google has, in its infinite wisdom, decided is somehow answering the question better than anybody else in terms of when people are searching for this, this is probably the place they want to go first. And then this is the next place, and then this is the next place. But how exactly does Google decide this stuff? And if you wanted your website to show up #1 and knock these guys out of that ranking, what would you have to do that? Well, first of all, I would say that this particular search term is what we would call insanely competitive. It's very, 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 very hard to show up in this spot. You don't do that unless you're doing a lot of things right for a long time. And just the people who are paying for these ads here, I don't know what the price is per click, but it's probably costing them a lot to be seen with this kind of visibility, because there's a lot of people who are searching for this stuff on an ongoing basis. And as you can see here, there's about 619 million web pages out there that are ranking, but only a handful of them are actually showing up here on this first page. If you've ever searched on Google, I'm willing to bet it's pretty rare that you would scroll all the way down here and then click on the second page and the third page and the fourth page until you find what you want. Most people are just going to stick to this first page and probably just these first few search results. Statistically, these top 3 will get the lion's share of clicks, and then these will get some, and then these will get some too, but not quite as many. And then when you scroll all the way down here, obviously the further you go, the less clicks you're going to get. So the higher up you can show in these rankings, obviously the better off you're going to be. And it's obviously pretty cool when you can show up right near the top and get a tidal wave of traffic without paying any money for it, like these people have to, because these are paid ads. So that's why it's kind of a big deal if you can actually get your website to rank. And something else I'll tell you, it's actually a lot more effective and a lot more feasible if you can rank not just for this like crazy competitive search term, but if you can get more specific about what exactly you are offering. Say if there's a geographic area you're serving or a certain type of property in this example that you are able to buy. So for example, it would be pretty hard to rank for this, but it would be a lot easier, say if I was trying to buy land and if I was only trying to buy it in the state of, I don't know, Washington or something like that. If that was the case, then instead I'd probably be targeting keywords like, sell my land fast in Washington, something like that. As you'll notice, there's not even any ads showing up for that particular search term, and it's probably not nearly as hard to rank for this if you really knew what you were doing and you knew how to build out your website in a way that it would get picked up by search engines like Google. So without further ado, that's what we're going to get into in the next few minutes here. So back in the early days of the internet, really the most important thing that mattered in terms of getting ranked in Google search results was to have a lot of other websites out on the internet linking back to your website. I mean, that was pretty much the most important thing that mattered. However, I mean, that matters much, much, much less today. It still matters some, but it's far less important than it used to be. And it can actually even hurt your website if a lot of the websites linking to yours are garbage websites, like link directories or spam websites or low quality websites. That kind of stuff can actually do damage. There's a lot more you need to pay attention to than just other websites that happen to be linking to yours or people sharing your stuff on social media. It matters to some extent, but it's not the end all be all. And I'm actually going to show you something here from a website called Backlinko. And the reason I want to show you this is because Google is actually using over 200 different ranking factors to decide which websites will show up where for various search terms. So it's not at all just about the other websites that are linking back to you. And when you look through all this stuff, I mean, it can be pretty overwhelming and kind of confusing. But ultimately, when you really take time to understand why these different things are being used as measurements and metrics to determine which websites show up where, it all kind of makes pretty good sense. I mean, Google has been in this business for a long time, and they're pretty good at figuring out which websites are actually delivering the answers to the questions that people are asking out there. So, okay, great. You can like nerd out on this and spend hours and hours and hours just trying to understand it, let alone trying to implement it on your website. But if we really wanted to boil this down and do kind of the 80-20 thing and figure out which of these metrics really, really, really matter more than anything else. And that's what I want to show you here, because there are a handful that I think will matter a lot more than others over the long term. And if you can nail these things, you'll end up in a pretty good place. It's not necessarily going to guarantee that you'll rank for everything you want, but I think before you start really trying to rank for keywords and things like that, these are sort of like the foundational things you have to have in place before you should expect to get anywhere. So first of all, what really matters more than anything else at the end of the day is the user experience when they land on your website. And as you'll see as we continue to go through this list, really all of this stuff ultimately points to the user experience. So when you land on a website and if you see pop-ups all over the place or a bunch of ads, or if the text is hard to read, or if you're viewing it on your phone and it's not mobile responsive, any of that stuff, all of those things negatively affect the user experience. And with that in mind, I think it's always a good idea to just visit your own website and take note of, like, what is this experience like? I know that might be hard since it's like your website and you've probably spent more time on that thing than anybody. But, I mean, to the extent possible, just always keep an eye out for things that could be improved, tweaked, or refined to make that user experience better. So one example I'll point you to is the RE Tipster blog. This is something I've tried really, really hard to be very, very cognizant of. It's easy to navigate through the site. It's easy to find where things are. It's easy to read. There's video, there's images. It's just generally a pretty fun experience to be on retipster.com. And there's actually a lot of effort we've put into doing this, and it works pretty well. So maybe you're watching this right now and thinking, okay, Seth, that's great for you, but I don't have a blog. My site hasn't been around for years. I don't have a ton of money to throw into a website and make it super interactive like that. I just have like a website, maybe it's one page or just a few pages, and it just exists to list my properties for sale or build a buyer's list, or find people who want to sell their properties for me. How can I enhance the user experience on a much smaller site like that? Well, that's what I want to show you, because it's actually not that hard. It's essentially a lot of the things that you might think. If you're able to do things like adding images to the pages that you write, and when you do write stuff, like, don't make this all one huge block of text that's hard to read. Like, break it up a little bit so it's easier to read. Use bold text, use italicized text to enhance certain words if you want. You could even use all caps, although I would do that sparingly because it kind of sounds like you're yelling at people. But if you just scroll through a website like this, you'll see that I put in plenty of images and bullet points and even videos that really help to explain a lot better how things work. Screenshots from the software that I'm trying to teach people how to use. There's a lot of things you can do to make your website a lot more interactive and user-friendly and just easy to get through the information, as opposed to just writing a bunch of boring content that's difficult to get through. And for that matter, I don't even necessarily think you need a ton of content on your website. For example, if the purpose of your site is to get people to submit their property information so that you can make an offer to buy their property, I'll just show you a theme here that I think does a really good job of that. If we head over to REI Conversion, let's go check out this theme. And this theme exists just to get people to submit their property information, preferably land, so that you can make an offer to buy that. So if we open up this demo, you can just kind of see how simple this is. So this whole thing is just one page, but it's all very thoughtfully put together in a way that makes sense and answers the user's questions and gets them to actually do what the website is asking them to do. You can see how all this text is broken up really nicely. It's friendly, it's easy to use. They've got this video here that people can watch that explains the whole process. It's not a super long video. It gets to the point in about a minute. There's a lot more explanation on how it works. You can see a testimonial here. Here's that submission form again. There's a space where it answers a lot of the user's questions. There's a little about section here at the bottom. And what I really like about this form is that this isn't actually the full form with all the questions that we want the user to fill out. They're just going to give us some very, very basic information so that we kind of get some buy-in from them. And then once they click this, they go on to another page where they actually answer a much longer list of questions. But they have to do this before they get there. If they landed on this page and we just blew them away with a huge list of like 50 questions, most people probably are not going to do that without a little bit of coaxing along to get them to fill out the information completely. And this kind of two-step process helps get them there. So I just thought this was a really solid example of a website that is not set up like a blog. There's not like gobs and gobs of information here. There's only the information that the user most likely wants to see, and it's pretty good at enticing the user to actually follow through with these steps and get started with the process. So just goes to show you, like, you don't need a huge blog. I think it's totally possible with a much smaller website like this if you're making the user experience really good and thoughtfully putting this kind of information together. So next on the list is content length. So there was a point in time at which people were trying to make their pages and articles and blog posts are really, really long, like 2,000 words or longer, because they thought that's what Google wanted to see. But these days, it's not just about how long an article or piece of content is. It has a lot more to do with how helpful it is and how quickly you're answering the user's question. So for example, if we go over here and search for the term perk test. So perk test is something that a lot of land investors and home builders have to worry about if they're buying rural land and it doesn't have access to a sewer system, because the soil has to perk in order for them to put a septic tank in there in order for them to build a house. So it's very, very important. However, that's a term that a lot of people aren't really familiar with unless they actually have to deal with this issue. So when you type in perk test, you'll see that's actually my video that shows up right there. Looks like Wikipedia is there at number 1. And there you go. Here's RE Tipster showing up at number 4 currently. So if we click on this, I just want to show you an example. If somebody is looking for the answer to what is a perk test, what they don't want to do is read through paragraphs and paragraphs and paragraphs before they can finally get the answer buried somewhere in here. What they want to do is get that answer right away. And if they want to continue reading and learning more, they can, but at least they have that answer that they were looking for. And you'll see right here, like, I don't waste time. I get right to the point in explaining what a perk test is. And I do it right here, and I've got this really nice video that I spent tons of time putting together. And if people want to continue reading, they can see more images and diagrams and other videos that explain more about how it works. Pretty much every question a person would ever have about perk tests is nailed here in this article. And even then, like, I'm still not ranking number 1 for this, but I spent lots of time trying to answer this question as well as I possibly could. And overall, it's performed pretty well over the long haul. So whenever you're putting any kind of page out there on the internet for people to see, you should always just be asking yourself, why does this page exist? Like, what question is this answering? What problem is this solving? And then you should really get into it and answer that question better than anybody. And most importantly, get to the point as soon as possible so that you're legitimately being helpful. Because if you don't, people are just going to get frustrated and leave your website. They're not going to stick around and keep trying to find that answer, because if you're not delivering it, you're going to get frustrated and leave. And by the way, that also affects the time on your page on your website, which search engines like Google can always track very easily and see, hey, how long are users spending on this website before they leave? The longer they spend on your website, that tells Google, hey, this website must be delivering up some valuable information. What you don't want is for somebody to land on your page, stay for 2 seconds, and leave. And I think inevitably that's always going to happen with every website. But the more it happens, the more it tells Google, well, this website must not be doing its job very well. But if people stick around, and better yet, if they stick around and continue to click on other pages of your site while they're there, that continues to tell Google, hey, this website's doing a good job. Let's send them higher up in the search rankings. So that's just a quick primer on how that part works. The next thing I want to talk about is quality backlinks. So as I mentioned earlier, way back in the early days of the internet, this was pretty much all that mattered. These days, it's just one of many things that matters. And what's even more important is that it's not just links, but quality links. So links from websites that Google recognizes as very high domain authority websites that have been around for a long time and has established a reputation for being a quality website. So in the real estate investing space online, some solid examples of this would be Bigger Pockets, or a website like Landlordology or retipshere.com. You know, these websites and communities have done a lot of good for a lot of people, and Google knows that. However, if you just go ahead and create a website today, put it up on the internet, put a link on there pointing to another website, that doesn't mean a whole lot in Google's eyes. And especially if that website is total garbage and has a lot of other stupid stuff on there, it could even hurt your website. So you don't just want to go getting links anywhere and everywhere. You want to get them from quality sources. And as you can imagine, getting a link from one of these websites isn't exactly easy. You can't just go ask for it, or you can't just go post a comment or a forum response and put your link in there, because a lot of times those things will get deleted because they look like spam, because they are. And a website like Bigger Pockets or Landlordology or retipster is not just going to link to somebody because you asked them to. You need to actually be delivering value, and then maybe, if you're lucky, one of these websites would link out to you. So it's kind of hard to get these links, and honestly, that's kind of the point, because Google doesn't want you to game their system and show up high in these search rankings just because you jump through a few loopholes and figured out these tricks to fool their system. You have to actually be doing it right. So that's part of the idea behind how this algorithm works. As we sort of touched on already, site reputation and authority. So when a website has been out there for a long time, if it has a lot of high quality pages, when it gets a lot of organic traffic, when people stick around on that website for a long time, when there's lots of other quality websites linking to it, all these things contribute to a website's reputation and domain authority. And the higher authority you have, the easier it's going to be for you to rank for stuff. For example, Wikipedia has been around since the dark ages of the internet. They've got probably millions of articles. Pretty much everybody out there refers to them for all kinds of different things. Obviously, they've got great domain authority. And pretty much any article they post out there on anything, as long as it's moderately helpful, it's probably going to rank really, really well, if not number one, because their domain authority has a lot of power and a lot to do with that. So just keep that in mind. If you're creating a website today and it hasn't been around long, it doesn't have much content, you're going to have pretty much no domain authority. But the longer you stick around and continue contributing value to people on the internet, the higher your domain authority is eventually going to go. Another one here is URL length. So I wouldn't say this is critical, but it's one of those things just to keep in mind whenever you're creating a new page or blog post or a property listing on your website. If you can keep that URL short and to the point, that's usually better than making it really, really, really long, over 100 characters long. And it's not because Google can't figure out what to do with these URLs. The real reason behind this, again, kind of goes back to the user experience. It's a lot easier to remember a URL that's shorter, and it's also a lot easier to share that on social media and other places if a person decides to do that. For example, On my website, I've got this blog post where I just shared 20 of the best books that kind of changed my life. And by default, when I first created that blog post, this was like the automatic URL that WordPress generated for me, but I didn't keep that URL because it was just ridiculously and unnecessarily long. Instead, what I did was I went ahead and manually edited it so that it was just retipster.com/best-books. And honestly, if I could redo this, I probably would have just gotten rid of that hyphen and made it just best books, all one word, because that's super easy to remember, super easy to share. So again, I'm not going to tell you this is like a make it or break it thing, but to the extent possible, just keep that in mind anytime you're creating a new page or URL on your website. The next thing on the list is internal links to the better pages on your website. And the reason this is important is there's actually a few reasons. And I'll start by showing you an example here on my own website. So this was a blog post I created a couple years ago called The Land Flipping Lifecycle. As you scroll through this blog post, you're going to see a lot of embedded links that point to other blog posts on my website. This blog post doesn't just explain how the entire land flipping business works. It actually links out to other blog posts that explain it even further. Say if I get down to like step 6, okay, the closing process. That's great that this is explaining the basics to me, but there's only so much I can explain in one blog post. But when I actually send people to other pages on my site, like there's other blog posts that explain in great detail how to actually close a cash land transaction, I mean, this is like way more helpful than just saying conduct an in-house cash closing. I'm actually explaining how to do everything in this other blog post that I linked to. So this not only builds more links to other pages within my website, yes, that's right, these links do count even when they're coming from your own site, but also it makes other content a lot more discoverable. So it kind of helps squeeze as much life out of your content as possible by helping people discover things they wouldn't otherwise see, and it also builds more links to your site from your own site. So again, going back to the user experience, you don't want to like include a bunch of pointless links throughout your website that like don't really serve a purpose or don't make sense, but when it does make sense, absolutely include links pointing people to other stuff on your site that is going to continue to help them. Now, along those same lines, it's also pretty helpful if you can include links to other high quality resources on the internet. So you don't just want to be self-interested and just point people to things on your own site, but when it's actually helpful, point people to other websites out there that also contribute value. So for example, in this blog post here, I've got this link that goes to another website, moneycrashes.com, which is an awesome website. This website gets millions of visitors each month, and for good reason. They've been around for a long time and they put out a lot of great content about personal finance, investing, small business, a lot of money related stuff. But I thought this article was a great resource, and it was something that was relevant at this point in the article when I was explaining an interesting way that you can use local real estate agents to your benefit. So that was just a good spot to link out to them. All right, so the next thing on the list here is author reputation. So when you start building a name for yourself on the internet or your company, it's important to let the world know that like you're legit. You're somebody that they really ought to pay attention to and listen to. For example, if you're talking about like how to value real estate and you happen to be a certified appraiser, then heck, let people know that you're a certified appraiser and you actually know what you're talking about. Like don't just hide that fact. Or if you're talking about some legal issue and you are an attorney, let them know you're an attorney. Or if you have a lot of experience in real estate and you're talking about some issue where that experience is particularly relevant, talk about that. And all this stuff can eventually add to your author reputation. And this doesn't necessarily have to do with like just including links to stuff all over the place. This is just letting people know that you're the real deal. You can also do this by adding all your certifications or experience to all your social media profiles. Say if you write a guest post for some other blog out there, make sure in your author bio you explain all the reasons why you're worth listening to. Or if you get interviewed on somebody's podcast and they link back to you, make sure you give all the details as to why you know what you're talking about. And all this stuff sort of cumulatively builds up over time to giving you a better author reputation or blogger reputation or podcaster reputation or YouTuber or fill in the blank with whatever it is you're doing online. So just give people plenty of valid reasons as to why they should pay attention to what you're doing, and that'll help out over the long run. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground so far. If you're still with me, give yourself a pat on the back. I know this is a lot to digest. If you're somebody who's been running websites on the internet for a while, a lot of this stuff might just be a review for you, but I know for a lot of beginners out there, especially if you've just put together your first website, some of this stuff, while, somewhat intuitive, like you probably didn't necessarily know all this. So I hope you're getting something out of this as we go through it. So now that we've kind of gone through a lot of the biggies, I want to hit some more of the technical issues that can hurt your website if you're not doing things quite right. First one of those things is the speed of your website, like how quickly it loads. So for example, when you go and land on any website, if it takes 20 seconds for the page to load and for you to actually see everything, a lot of people are not going to sit around just waiting and waiting and waiting for your website to load, unless it's something they absolutely have to have or have to see or do. If they're just kind of cruising around the internet and just checking out what's out there, they're not going to be patient and stick around for this. So your website has to load as quickly as possible. It's not necessarily imperative that you're the fastest website on the internet, because for a lot of websites, that's just not feasible. We don't have an unlimited budget to buy the most expensive website hosting plan on earth. That's not really something we can do. However, it is important that you're not in the slowest 20% of websites on the internet. So you don't need to be the best, but you definitely don't want to be the worst either. And I think with most respectable hosting companies, you're not going to be that bad as long as you're not cluttering up your website, which I'll get to in just a second. But if you're using a very run-of-the-mill hosting plan with a company like Bluehost or HostGator or something like that, you're probably going to be fine as long as your website is reasonable and you don't have a ton of huge files and images bogging down your website. However, if you use a more expensive high-end hosting plan through a company like WP Engine, which is designed for WordPress sites, it's actually what I'm using for retipster.com at the time of this recording, and I can tell you they're pretty darn good and they load sites pretty fast, and even when they don't, they can usually identify why they're not, and they can even help you understand what you need to do to improve that. So you get pretty good customer service with one of those more expensive hosting plans. However, for a lot of brand new websites, I don't really think that's necessary, to be honest. I think as long as you get hooked up with a fairly respectable hosting company, again, Bluehost, HostGator, those are both pretty widely known and at least somewhat respected hosting companies, and they're pretty inexpensive too. There is a website that's free called gtmetrics.com where you can go and just put in your website URL and analyze it, and it's going to run its little test and test how fast your website is loading from some random place in the world. In this case, it's coming from Vancouver, Canada. And let's see what it says. Okay, so this is coming in with a page speed score of 90% or A, and then a Y slow score of C. If that said D, or if the page speed score said C or something like that, then I would probably start looking at things I could do to fix that. And I can also tell you, this is something that I and my website developer spent quite a bit of time on trying to get this to score as well as it possibly could. And the reason this is actually sort of a challenge for a website like retipster.com is because this isn't just a website with 4 or 5 pages. There are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of blog posts. And a lot of those blog posts have a lot of images in them and videos, which are hosted on YouTube or Vimeo, so it's not necessarily hosted on my site. But there's just a lot of stuff that has to load in some of these blog posts. And once a website gets huge like that, this becomes more and more of a challenge to keep this load time happening quickly, especially when you start using a lot of that multimedia stuff within your site. I think with most basic real estate websites that are just a few pages or maybe a few pages and a handful of listings and a reasonably good hosting plan, this probably is not going to be a huge issue for you. But just so you know, it does matter that your site loads reasonably fast. Another thing that's pretty important is that your website is mobile friendly. And this is actually something that kind of happens by default these days, because just given how the internet works and where traffic comes from, everybody kind of knows that a lot of people are on their phones or tablets and that kind of thing. So most WordPress themes and other website builders will automatically be set up so that it just works in a mobile responsive way. And what exactly do I mean by that? Well, I'll just show you this example from AgentPress Pro. This is a theme that I used for a long time on both of my real estate websites. And as you can see, it looks visually great just on a desktop computer. But in this demo, we can also switch it to look like the size of a tablet. And when it gets smaller and narrower, it still looks great. You have to scroll a little bit longer and the menu changes a little bit, but it still looks awesome and it's not really hard to read. And again, when you make it even smaller, the size of a phone, it still looks great. You can scroll through everything. All the buttons are big enough to press with your thumb. You can read everything just fine. So that's what it means to be mobile responsive, is when the website is designed to look good no matter what the size of the browser window is. And again, if you're working with any kind of a respectable present day theme or a website builder, I think this is probably going to be built in by default, but it's always worth double checking this. Just pull up your website on your phone and try to navigate through it. And if it seems easy to do that, you're good. And if it's hard to do that, if it's hard to read stuff, then that could be a problem. Might be worth finding a different theme that works a little bit better. Now, another thing you'll want to pay attention to is if you have a website that has lots of links, either pointing to other pages on your site or to other websites on the internet, that's when this can get even more tricky, is to make sure that none of those links are broken, meaning when a user clicks on those links, they don't go to a website that no longer exists or the page no longer exists. That obviously hinders the user experience a little bit. When you're telling them to do something, they do it, and then it doesn't work. Whenever you become aware of broken links on your site, make sure you fix those. And there's actually a number of tools out there. Some of them are free, some of them are paid, but you can use them to monitor when and where these broken links come up so that you can very easily get in there and fix them. So I'm not going to get into that here in this video, but I will link to some of those resources beneath this video in case you're interested in that. So another thing that can get in the way of the all-important user experience we keep touching on here is having too many ads on your website. And by the way, when I say ads, I'm not just talking about the big like banner image advertisements. This also means affiliate links. That's right. Google now looks at affiliate links basically the same way as ads, which actually makes sense when you think about it, because usually when somebody's throwing an affiliate link anywhere on their site, I mean, it is an advertisement. If you have any kind of a page or blog post on your site where you're just like linking to tons and tons and tons of different affiliate promotions, or if you just have flat out ads all over the place, when you have too much of that stuff lumped together in one place, Google will start to see that as, oh, well, there's not quite as much value here because it's just somebody trying to sell a bunch of stuff. So I will say that I do have a lot of various affiliate links on my website, but whenever I use them, I'm like very, very clear about that. I also put them in there pretty sparingly, and I don't really even talk about stuff unless I've already delivered a ton of value that's directly relevant to that affiliate link. I might include a huge video or blog post dedicated to what that thing is and how to use it. Then I'll throw that affiliate link in there. I'm not just pointlessly linking out to a bunch of affiliate products without explaining anything else about them. Another example I'll point you to about how to do this, not perfectly, but more effectively, if you want to check out the resources section of retipster.com, you'll see just a page where I list out all kinds of products and services that I've found helpful. Some of them are free, some of them are paid, and a lot of these things are affiliate links, but here's the key. A lot of them aren't. And a lot of these I don't make money from. I just list them because they're helpful. So people can come to this page and know legitimately that all this stuff is actually useful, but some of this stuff will make money for retipster.com if they click through and buy something. So this isn't just like a flat out, I'm going to sell the heck out of you on this page. This is like, no, these are the things that like I actually use or have used in the past, and I've found them helpful, and if you want to use them too, this is a way you can help support the site. But it's not just a sell fest. And I actually got this idea from Pat Flynn's website over at smartpassiveincome.com. If we want to go check out how he's doing it, looks a little bit different than mine, but in essence, it's the same basic idea where he's got a lot of just genuinely helpful things in here. Some of them, but not all of them, are affiliate links. And he's not just trying to shove this down anybody's throat. He's just saying, hey, look, This is what I am willing to put my name behind because I've used it and I think it's great. Feel free to check it out if you want to. That's just another example of how to do this right. Another thing that matters is the age of the content. So if you go out there and build a website and put it out there today, it's not really going to rank for anything. And that should just be expected because not only did you just make it and the age is basically 0, but you probably don't have a ton of content out there yet. However, if you put out just an amazing killer piece of content, it'll take probably at least a few weeks, if not a few months, for Google to really latch onto that and start ranking it in search where it thinks it belongs. And usually by the time it's been out there for about 9 months, that's when it will have about 90% of its full potential in terms of where it's going to show up in search rankings. So it does take a little bit of time for things to rank organically. It's not something you can just do and have it happen tomorrow unless you're like paying for ads. But even that I don't think is nearly as effective as an organic search result. Another thing that is starting to matter a lot more, in fact I'd almost say it's a must these days, is to get what's called an SSL certificate. And essentially an SSL certificate will encrypt your website so that user data isn't visible to other people. And it used to be that this was only necessary on websites that gathered a lot of user data and or processed financial transactions like credit card payments and that kind of thing. But these days, pretty much every website out there really ought to have one. And the reason this is now a lot more important than it used to be is because if you go to a website that does not have an SSL certificate, and if you're using the Chrome browser, for instance, I'll just show you what that looks like. Chances are you've seen this yourself, but just in case you've never picked this up before, let's see here. Let me try to find a website out there that does not have one, just so I can show you. Okay, so this is the first one I found after doing some searching on Google. So as you'll see, this website does not have an SSL certificate, and if your visitors are using the Chrome browser, it's going to say right up there, not secure, which is obviously not a comforting thing to see on any website. Whether you're giving them any of your personal information or not, that's just generally not something you want to see, and it's not good to have that. So when you do have an SSL certificate, you're not going to see that not secure sign. You're going to see a little lock there. So it's one of those things that's fairly subtle, but definitely important if you want to have a respectable website that people feel like they can trust. And the good news is, if you don't have an SSL certificate, in most cases, it's not that hard to get one. All you have to do is log into your hosting account, and most web hosting companies these days will give you a pretty easy, like 1 or 2 click process, and it's free to get your SSL certificate. It's generally not a hard thing to do. And if you happen to be using a hosting company that doesn't make it that easy for some odd reason, you can also go to a website like let'sencrypt.org, and you can also get a free one from there. So it's something that I think you should have in place. Your website is still going to continue to work if you don't, but you're going to have that little disconcerting, not secure message up at the top, which, I just don't see any reason why that's necessary when it's so easy to go ahead and get your own. So if you don't have an SSL certificate, do yourself a huge favor and get one. It'll help out a lot. And then last but certainly not least is copyright violations and plagiarism. Obviously, you shouldn't ever plagiarize content from another source. Don't ever copy and paste something word for word from their site onto your site. The central idea is anything that's on your website needs to be original content. And if you do quote somebody else or use their material, make sure you just cite that in some way, shape, or form. Like clearly note that this is a quote and then link to where you got the quote from, just so people can say, oh, okay, Seth didn't write this, these other people did, and he's letting us know. It's as simple as that. And I'll actually tell you, I've actually done this for a lot of blog posts where I also have an account on Medium. And part of the reason I have literally copied and pasted a lot of my articles from retipster.com over to medium.com is because it gives me exposure to a whole other audience that is probably never going to directly come to retipster.com, but they are on Medium, and they can discover my stuff on Medium, and then through that, discover retipster.com. So just for example, if I go here to my stories, you can see that I've currently published 42 of them. if I click on any one of these things, and if you cross-check this with the original article on retipster.com, you'll see that it's pretty much a carbon copy. But the key is, at the very bottom of this post on Medium, I say, this article was originally published on retipster.com, and I also waited at least a few days after publishing it on retipster.com before I came over here to Medium to do this, so that Google in all its infinite wisdom can know, oh, okay, the original one was on retipster.com. We can tell that because the original content appeared there, and then also at the bottom of this Medium article, there's a link pointing directly back to that original article. So it's just very, very clear what's going on. I think it's totally fine to have duplicate content out there if you're very clear about what the original source is. That way, neither source gets penalized. But if you're not giving credit like this, I think you're leaving yourself pretty vulnerable to get smacked down by Google's algorithm. And also, one really helpful resource just to keep in your back pocket, if you're ever concerned about this, is a website called Copyscape, where you can go ahead and put in your website URL and see if there's anybody else on the internet who is ripping you off. If you ever have any questions or suspicions on that, it's a pretty nice free service that can help out with that. But with that pretty much wraps up all of the basic fundamental SEO principles. And again, there's a lot more to the puzzle than just what I'm showing you here. But this, I think, is probably the most important and lowest hanging fruit that you can directly impact. And for the most part, a lot of this stuff is well within your control. You just have to put in the work and the thought and the effort to make sure your website is really serving up the most helpful content in the easiest, most digestible way possible. And by the way, I'm not making any of this stuff up. If you want to check out Google's actual guidebook, and I'll also have a link to that beneath this video, so if you want to, you can go ahead and read through all that stuff. I don't think you'll find it much more interesting or riveting than what I have written out here. But if you want to see the full long-form version coming directly from the horse's mouth, you might find that interesting if you're really into this stuff. So thanks a lot for watching. Thanks for sticking with me. I hope you found this helpful and informative. And I wish you all the best as you're working on getting your website to rank. Talk to you next time.